And I want to welcome everybody to the call today, to the webinar. This is Kathleen Gage. I am known as the Street Smarts Marketer. And everybody who is on this webinar today was invited through my efforts. And I am thrilled to bring to you my good friend, my colleague, and just a confidant and a spiritual advisor to me, David Perdue. David, as you may or may not know, is the founder of Nance, which is Niche Affiliate Marketing Systems, and he started that nearly 4 years ago. It started with a concept, an idea. He had no way of knowing if it would work or not, and it's now one of the largest events in the internet marketing, affiliate marketing world. Happens every August, or actually it's coming up in February is the next one, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. But today we're going to talk about Do It Now with Love, and it's a unique take on business and life. David is a leading consultant for some of the top companies in the world, the largest corporations in the world, and I believe you've done consulting with AT&T, with I don't even know all the companies you've done consulting with as a very high-level consultant advisor. David is married to a wonderful woman. Her name is Charlesa, and we call her Chuck for short. She's a football fan. She keeps David in line when all else fails. And he lives out in the country with a home that you built yourself.
I did.
In 2000, what year was it you built this?
2002.
2002. It's a log cabin out in the country on 90 acres, I believe, with his critters, his 2 dogs, a cat, and he is a phenomenal businessman. And with no further ado, I'm going to turn it over to you, Dave, for the discussion on Do It Now with Love.
Wow. Thank you, Kathleen. I really appreciate the introduction. I feel like I'm somebody special. So, oh, thank you. Thank you. And so are you, by the way. One of the things about doing it now with love that I want to start with is that in, I think it was 2007 or 8, whatever the year was, with Willie's birthday bash, Willie Crawford's birthday bash. It was his 50th birthday, and Willie was having a bunch of people come to Florida to meet with him and to speak. And I knew Willie, but I didn't know a lot of the people on his speaking panel, and one of them was Kathleen. And so I listened to some of the audio teleseminars that you guys had done and that Willie was doing, and one of them was Kathleen, and I listened and I thought, uh-oh, I got to meet this woman. And so I specifically went to Orlando, I think it was, for that birthday bash, just to meet Kathleen, and we were there maybe 4 hours, and I chased her down and said, I want to have lunch with you. And we sat, we had lunch, and we spilled guts to each other, and I just fell in love with Kathleen Gage. And you've been a blessing to me ever since. And you've been an instructor now 3 or 4 times at NAMS, so I really appreciate it. That's been great.
It has, and I remember that meeting, and I was just thrilled beyond compare to have you invite me to speak at NAMS, and we've developed a very deep friendship. And one of the things I really love about you, David, is your spiritual foundation that you carry into all areas of your life. It's not that there's a separation where, okay, today I'm going to be spiritual and then I'll do business on the side. Business is a very spiritual expression to you, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So I want to welcome everybody who's on the call, because you're in for quite a treat.
It is, and this is the one place I feel safe really talking about this. I mean, I can talk about this everywhere. I can talk about this at NAMS because we attract that kind of people. And it actually, I credit this with the reason that NAMS has grown so much is because we attract the kind of people who are not necessarily religious, not necessarily spiritually based, not necessarily, they're ethical, and they are good people who want to do business properly and reward themselves by doing service to others. So we're going to get into that and talk about that. A lot of stuff here, but first I want to just jump in and say this is called Do It Now with Love. There's three parts to this: it, now, love. And we're going to describe what it is, what now is, and what the love part is and has to do with it. Now, and I got to tell you up front, this may not be for everybody, because if you are looking for something that is step-by-step technique, tactic, how to do this, how to do that. That's not what this one is about. This one is about how to create a atmosphere, I think, and really get in touch with who you are and what you want to bring to the world. And to me, that's the most important part of what we do in anything, not just business. So Kathleen, let's start with this. I want people to take a look at the next few slides. This is better or worse. It's like going to the ophthalmologist or your optometrist and you get your eyes checked. Better or worse, left or right. Make a choice. Think about how these pictures make you feel. Make a choice. Here, better or worse. Same kids, 10 years later. They happen to be my kids. This is on the, it is my kids.
I love it.
This is my kids on the left. This is 6 months into the divorce with their mother. And we're in child paradise, Disney World. And look at those kids. This is my kids 10 years later on the right. Better or worse? What do you want? Not all better or worse decisions are in your life or choices are easy. I love both of these places. But which one will I choose for a feeling, for a peaceful type feeling? You know, better or worse? For you, it may be the woods. For me, it may be the beach. I live in the woods, so I love the beach as well. Here's another one that we all get caught in this trap. Better or worse? Money, and lots of it, or out-picturing the abundance by doing what you want, living where you want, and kind of feeling that abundance in your daily life. A lot of people think that money is what brings them happiness. I think that doing it, whatever it is, brings you happiness. That's my wife and I on our motorcycles in front of the house that I built in the woods. And I'll tell you that this house that I built in the woods and those motorcycles, in a few minutes I'll tell you the story about how that came about, and you'll be shocked because I had no idea that this was going to happen in our lives. But I'll tell you in a few minutes about how that happened. So make a choice, better or worse. How do these things feel to you? Which do you want? So here are my choices.
May I interject something, David?
Anytime.
Okay. The thing that oftentimes people lose sight of is it's about creating a lifestyle, and many times they just focus on, I want to make the money, make the money, without thinking, what is it that I want the money to do for me? And these images that you have up on the screen right now, especially the one of your kids who are just as joyful as can be, and then the one of you and Charlesa, that really shows lifestyle. And when we focus on what we want in our lifestyle, we tend to have more joy and love in the businesses that we run, rather than it's only about the bottom line of money.
Yep, I agree absolutely. You know, and so if I made my choices, these are the 4 pictures I chose because I want to feel like this guy who's king for a day, right? I mean, who wants to feel like that other guy who's worried, stressed, all of that? Who wants to have the relationship with those kids who are not happy and stubborn and can't be satisfied in Disney World? I want these kids, you know. Now, there was a lot that went into that to make that transition from those kids to these kids. And I've written an entire book about that. So if somebody wants to know more about that, I can tell you that. But that was really important to me, and it's something that I actually absolutely had to make a conscious choice to do. The beach is a place where I find that I can get real peace. I can go to the beach and walk along the water and spend some time just dipping my toe in the Gulf of Mexico, and that is just a place where I like to retreat twice a year. My wife and I go there for 4 to 6 weeks a year and just hang out down at the beach. And it's the lifestyle that you talked about on the right. That to me is huge. If I'm not living the lifestyle I want, even though my lifestyle, the lifestyle I choose is really busy and a lot of work, because I enjoy that. And I had to do a lot of soul searching about that, because people say, David, you work 12 hours a day. And I do work 12 hours a day, minimum 12 hours a day. But I love work. I love to do the other things that I do too. And I'll show you some of that in a minute too. But to me, the ability to do all of that is the key to everything. And it's a choice that we have to make.
And David, will you be talking about how we make those choices today and what some of your strategies are for making the best choices for what you want in life? Or you,
Absolutely.
so that other people, okay, great.
Absolutely. Because the key to all of this is the ability to make those choices and know where those choices come from. And in fact, let's just go see what I've got here. Before we get to those choices, I want to tell you this was me on the right. That's not me, really, but I felt that way most of my life.
You have better hair than that guy.
I got a lot better hair than that.
But you have great hair.
That's me up in the left. But that on the right is the way I really felt for many years. I was always worried, what if this happened? What if that happens? And I was completely out of control, and control is what I wanted most of my life. Is I just fought for control. And then the other thing is I always needed to win. I wanted to be the one who was on top. I was the one who I just had to be right. I always wanted to be right. And my wife actually says sometimes still when I'm driving that if I drive too fast down the interstate, she'll say, "You're trying to be first." And sometimes I am trying to be first, I guess, but that's not what the goal of that is. I want to tell you 3 stories about misery, just quickly, that are really about the things in my life that have been miserable. And then we're going to get into how I got out of those things. And the choices were not that difficult. What always amazes me is why I chose to be miserable. I heard somebody say not long ago that suffering is inevitable, misery is a choice. And I think that's true. I think we all go through challenges. And how we react to those challenges is truly how we will build our lifestyle and build our life. And it's the kind of thing that helps us determine who wants to be around us and what kind of a person we are. So, we have to welcome the challenges. I like to say that I've never had a problem in my life. I always thought that my life was full of problems. Now, looking back on anything, and almost 60 years old, I have a lot to look back on. I see that everything that happened to me, and some of it was really bad. At the time, I thought it was really bad. Everything that happened to me is what it took to get me where I am. So I bless it. I'm thankful for it, and I'm grateful even for the challenges. They weren't easy. But just to illustrate these 3 points, though, the worry, control, and win, the first story is about my son, Matt. He's the oldest boy in that picture I showed you earlier. Matt, when he was 18 months old, Matt was walking through the kitchen. He had a 4-year-old sister at that point, and his diaper was wet. And I said, "Matt, did you wet your diaper?" And he said, "No, Jennifer did it." So at 18 months, he's already blaming other people in his life. At 6 years old, I walked into the bedroom, and there he stood with his hand in the cookie jar in my closet getting the money out of the cookie jar. And I said, "Matt, what are you doing?" "Nothing." He's already lying to me. He went off to the Air Force. He had a rough high school. He went off to the Air Force, and when he was in the Air Force 3 years, I thought, I wasn't sure. I drove from Atlanta to Oklahoma just to drop in on him to see if he was actually in the Air Force because I did not trust him. I didn't believe anything he would tell me because that was our relationship. I'd set that up. About 4 months ago, and so that's the kind of, I'm going to say first, that's the kind of platform I built on him. About 4 months ago, I went down to, where was it? Tyndall Air Force Base, where Matt had been in training for 6 weeks to get his commission. He'd been in the Air Force 13 years, and he was finally getting his commission because he had earned a degree, and a master's degree, by the way, while he was in the Air Force. He had married, had 3 kids, and for some reason I didn't quite trust him yet that this was all still going to go. So I went down there and stood in his ceremony and watched him get honors and get a commission, and I thought, who's changed here? Matt has changed a ton. I have not changed my perception of him at all. So in one day I was able to make a choice. I have a new relationship with my son. And I was miserable for years about this relationship with Matt because I just never trusted him. I thought, what have I done wrong? It's not going the way I want. And all that time, he was changing. I was viewing it through a really ugly filter. So I had to make that choice to make that change. Let's see. I want to talk about the control thing a second. In 2002, this story relates to later when I built the house and everything. But in 2002, I was in that high-paying consulting job that you referenced, that role that I was doing as a consultant, the contractor, and I was in a meeting where there was a woman who was a very difficult woman to be with. In fact, she was so difficult that the VP of the company had sent me to represent him so I could sit in that meeting and kind of put forward his position. And I was sitting next to her. And this was the time, 2002, everybody had a little text pager. We didn't have cell phones that we did text on. We had little text pagers. So the meeting was going on, and she was driving it in a direction it shouldn't go, and I kept saying, we need to bring it back. And she finally turned to me and said, David, shut up. This is my meeting. There's 30 people in the room. This is my meeting. Get over it. Be quiet. Leave me alone. And I got mad as hell because I'm in control. I'm in charge. I'm important. And I got up, excused myself, went to the restroom. On my way, I did my little thumb text to my VP person and said, Vaughn, you're never going to have to worry about her again because I'm going to kill that effing. And then I sent it to her, not him. You ever done anything like that, Kathleen?
Oh, no. Oh, yes. I actually did once.
So,
oh, my gosh.
I'm thinking I'm a consultant. She's a former divorce attorney who's ruthless, who's now in charge of international business. And I've made a death threat against this woman in the building. And I just bought 2 new motorcycles and a house, and I have a new wife. And in an instant, all of this went crashing down, and I thought, I'm going to lose it all this afternoon. Now, that's not new territory to me. I had lost it all twice before, and it's not fun. And so I thought, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? I'm looking at the pager, and on the pager there are 2 initials, R and D. R stands for read, D stands for delivered. And it says D, D, D. She hasn't read it yet. So I thought, well, I'll go back in there, I'll sit down, and I'll make a joke out of it. I'll do whatever I can, but, I'm dead meat. I know that. All she's got to do is take my badge. And I went in and sat down beside her, and the room was kind of dark, and she's talking, and the pager's in her lap, and I just reached next to her. I was sitting next to her, by the way, and so I reached over, and I got her pager, deleted the message, and put it back. And she looked at me like, what are you doing? And somebody else asked her a question, and she never questioned it again. But that moment, I can tell you, it was February 19th, 2002, was a defining day in my life. At that day, I thought, I am too important, I am too in charge, I am in too much control, and that is all wrong. I'm not in control of anything. I'm not in charge of anything. I am not important in anything. So I left there. I went home and told my wife about it. She laughed and said, well, it's fixed. It's not a big deal. But you're right. You would have lost everything. And, it was a wake-up call. It was one of those wake-up calls that we have to get. And today, you've seen this, Kathleen, at the workshop. I wear a little string around my wrist today. It's 10 years later. I wear a little string around my wrist, and I have to replace it about every 3 or 4 years. But it's one of those little knit strings, and it is my I am not in charge string. So when I go into meetings, and if somebody's doing something I don't like, I reach over and I grab my little string and I twirl it around my wrist and sit there and say, I'm not in charge. I'm not in charge. Now, to me, that means source is in charge of my life, whether you call it God or faith or universe or good or whatever, that is in charge of my life. And that's really all I need to say about that. I don't care what you believe in, but I know that there's something bigger than me. And I'm not in charge. The right thing's going to work out.
David, I actually have a piece of leather around my wrist with the word faith. I got silver letters, and whenever I am doubting what's going on, and I think this is an important dialogue because it took me a long time to really understand that I wasn't in control, and the more I came to terms with that, the more control I had in my life. It's just like the more I admitted I was powerless over things, the more power I had, which is, it's really counterintuitive, but I keep the word faith in, and as you were talking, I just looked at it, it's like, oh yeah, faith.
Oh,
Have
yeah.
faith in what is to come.
Yeah. And isn't that freeing? Isn't that freeing?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So,
and it's interesting because since I took on that belief, and it's just so core to what I do, the fear of what comes next is pretty much non-existent. It's like I really am in this moment of, I know everything's going to work out if I just show up and do the footwork.
yeah, exactly. And the footwork there is the really important key. And we're going to get into that too, because that is action. And action is, that's my role in life, is to take action. Mark Hendricks, our friend Mark Hendricks says, and one of the reasons I connected with Mark was because of this same kind of belief system in business, really, the spiritual business belief system, is that Mark's metaphor is, I paddle, I don't steer. So when you talk about taking your canoe down the river of life, Mark says, I paddle, I don't steer. And I love that analogy. So the third story here is just last year, in January of last year, a year ago. I'd been working on building this business that had over 2,000 websites and a back-end system that tied them all together so that people could buy and sell and do all that kind of stuff, all the products that I had. It was called the Niche Mall. And I'd been working on it and I paid a ton of money to get this done. And in January, I had a really bad hack on a server that not only destroyed most of what I had, my entire business, but the database as well. So we had to rebuild the database. That was the only way to do this. So at that time, I thought, I'm starting over again from scratch. I had gone instantly from about $300,000 in income from that site, from that business model, a year to zero, instantly. And I thought, oh, well, I panicked. I mean, I did. That's what you do. These kind of things happen to you. I don't care what your faith is, you panic. But then you know that you got a place to go, right? You got a place to go inside, and you start looking at what's next, what's next, what's next. And for me, what was next was, okay, I can't afford to panic. I need to do what's next. I'm going to put the panic aside. I'll let somebody else take care of the panic, and I'll do the action. And so what I did was, in that 3 years that took us to build that, I learned a lot. And so it took us 6 months to rebuild that entire business model instead of 3 years. And we built it back better. So it's now incorporated into NAMS, into the My NAMS website. We have 1,200 products in there right now that are launching on Friday, as a matter of fact, as a benefit to our members. They get 100% commission on anything they sell out of there as a paid member. So that's just one of the things that we're trying to do to serve our members by giving them a greater benefit.
David, since you brought NAMS up, could you talk a little bit about that for the people who have never heard about it? Because I think that, that ties really nicely into how you incorporate your spiritual and your faith stuff into your business. But if you could talk just a little bit about what NAMS is and, what you just shared about this place where people could get 100% commission.
Sure. First, I'm going to say something. I'll preface it with this. I noticed that you had Connie Reagan-Green on as a guest just recently.
Yes.
And Connie came to NAMS last time as a guest at NAMS. She wasn't a speaker. She was going to be a speaker. She is a speaker in February, an instructor, and she's also going to be one of our motivational speakers. But
she's incredible, by the way.
Unbelievable.
And it was only for my VIP members. It was only for people who belong to my membership program. So some of the people on this call, they didn't get to hear her last night, and if they want to hear her, they can join the membership program.
Yeah, so. Connie is outstanding. but I didn't know her that well. And at the end of NAMS 6 in August, I do a Monday morning get-together with everybody who stays over, and we do a networking and appreciation and awards and that kind of thing. And Connie came up to me and said, David, I just want you to know that this event has changed my life, and it's because of this spiritual track that you take, the spiritual tack that you take. And like I said, it's not religious. It's not anything like that at all. All it is about integrity, ethics, and doing good for other people first. So having said that, NAM started August of what is 2009, I guess. 9, 10, 11, yeah, August 2009. And it was a way for me to do a weekend training seminar for the people who were part of my hosting company at that time. And we had 65 people show up. I had six instructors, and it was so successful that by the end of the weekend, people wanted to do it again. And we signed up about 60% of those to come back in August, and we went to multiple tracks because we recognized that what we did was we solicited feedback, which we do every workshop multiple times, and then we change based on the feedback that we get. And so the NAMS workshop has been 6 times now. We're up to about 350 people. We have 4 tracks. We have 5 rooms in those 4 tracks, including beginner. We call them NAMS 100, 200, 300, and 400. Think of it as a university. We're building toward a school model where the 100 are people who don't have a website and they don't know what to do to get online to get their business online. The NAMS 400 people are people who are making a full-time living online, and they need to mastermind with each other to figure out how to build more assets and to what's their exit strategy, and complicated business issues at that point when you're really making some decent money. And so that's the workshop. Now, one of the feedback pieces in February of last year was, we go to the workshop, we don't have a place to communicate, to keep the relationships together. So I built the membership site, mynams.com, to have a forum where they have accountability groups based on geographic region, and they have weekly webinar training, and they get all kinds of products and benefits. And then this newest benefit that I've added is the niche mall inside, so that if you have, for example, a self-help is your niche, we have a self-help category with 10, 15, 20 digital products that you can you just get your affiliate link and you send people to the sales page, and you can start selling material immediately. So that's
Okay.
what NAMS is.
Just so that people had a point of reference, but one of the things that I think is so important in what you said that I really believe ties in with everything we're talking about today is that you get feedback from people. And
yeah.
Feedback is how we gauge our life, and hopefully we listen to that feedback. So I wanted to make sure people understood what Niche Affiliate Marketing Systems was all about.
Well, everything I'm going to say today is about feedback, but I don't really say it in that way. So I'm glad you brought it up, because to me, if you do anything, if you make any choices and you don't look at what the feedback is from that choice, whether it's your wife yells at you, or your dog bites you, or you lose $100,000, all of that is feedback, and you always have to be examining what the feedback is, because it's telling you where to go next.
Absolutely.
So
it's like when you eat that piece of cake and it feedbacks right to my hips. I get it.
That's it. It's feedback.
Oh my. Oh, look at that. I look a little, I think that picture was taken shortly after my father passed away. I can see the exhaustion in myself right there. That's amazing.
Yeah, that was NAMS 3, so it could have been right after that.
It was right around that time,
Yep.
yeah.
So one of the things I ask you to think about is what's your calling. A minister will stand in front of the room and say, I'm called to be a minister to God. Or I have a sister-in-law and a brother-in-law who have been missionaries now for 12 years in Ethiopia. And they are called to be missionaries. I think we all have a calling. I don't have a calling to do anything like that. I have a calling to be of service. And it took a long time for me to recognize that and to accept it and act on it. One of the things, when I was in college, before I got out of, well, I went to college twice because the first time didn't work out so good. I actually went to Purdue University, and my last name, of course, is Purdue, so I got some recognition there. And I don't know what happened. Really, I do know what happened. I found girls and I found beer. And so the whole second semester. What a combination. Yeah, it's quite a combination. And so the whole second semester was a blur for me. And by the time I left my freshman year, they said, maybe you should think about going somewhere else. So, poor guy named Purdue got kicked out of Purdue. But my second round, after I went to the Air Force for a little while and grew up some, my second round was in Indiana University in journalism school. And as a senior and a more mature student, I had really kind of gotten a lot of trust and notoriety and was asked to teach a class on newspaper and magazine design as a grad assistant, but I wasn't a graduate student. So I got to do that. And when I did that, I thought, oh, I love teaching. I love teaching. I want to be a professor in a college. But I never wanted to go back and get a doctorate degree, That was not my calling. But I loved teaching, and I wanted to be somebody who impacted people in that way, to teach. And so in August of 2009, when I started NAMS, I fed that big time. I was teaching again, and I loved it. So to me, that became my calling, is to teach and to be of service to other people. Now, everybody has a different calling, and you got to identify what that is. And it can change, It doesn't, what you want to do, what you feel called to do today, doesn't mean that that's what you're going to do later. Right now, I'm more of a manager than I am a teacher because I'm managing NAMS, but I love doing that. I'm teaching more at this one than I usually do, which is going to be exciting.
So, David, how would you say that somebody would find their calling? Because I know a lot of times, I've actually been recently delving into some of Deepak Chopra's meditation information, and one of the series has to do with finding your purpose and your calling. What is your dharma? How is it that people can discover that? Because I know that's a big question most people have, is what is my purpose, what is my calling? Yep,
absolutely. And to tell the truth, I think that is the next slide. So the three questions we ask is it or not it? Is it now or not now? And do I love it? And I talk about it with capital IT versus small it. I mean, this it, when people say, oh, he's got it, or she gets it, they're talking about something that is larger and understood, right? And that's what I'm talking about here. It, knowing what it is for me. And my wife and I, over the last 2 or 3 years, have really tried to simplify our lives down to, is it? Is it not it? And is it now or is it not now? Now, the reason now or not now is important. We're going to get into that too. But if you're living in the now, you got no issues. If you're living in the past or the present, it is terrifying. Or past or future, it's terrifying, right? And if you're doing what you think is it, but you don't love it, it ain't it. And we got to work on getting that in the right spot. So I know that sounded a little confusing, but let's look at it, not it. And the first thing is discovery. This is really important. You got to spend time looking at yourself. You got to do a honest self-appraisal. I don't know about you, Kathleen, but when I did my first honest self-appraisal and started writing things down on a piece of paper, the first time I did it and showed it to somebody, I had to go back and redo it because they pointed out things that I had completely missed or things that I was completely wrong about. And it's
Right.
good and bad. It's good and bad.
Right. I went through a similar experience. I did an inventory of my life and had a spiritual mentor who guided me through this, and she looked at it and she said, wow, I see ego all over the place.
Oh, yeah.
And the way that it was described, ego is edging God out. And again, it could be higher power, it could be source, universe. But it was all, I was putting blame on everybody else for the way my life was at the time. And some people who are on my subscriber list, they know that at one point I did end up homeless in my 20s and without a job, very unemployable, and today my life is completely different, and it had to do with that honest self-appraisal of what was I doing and what did I need to change. So yeah, I completely messed up the first time around and probably the second and third.
Yeah, and see, and you and I have that in common, that homeless bit. I was in my 30s. I was living out of my car for about 3 months. And I'll tell you a quick story about that. My wife had thrown me out, and by the way, she had $60 million. And so when she threw me out, I went with the 5 boxes that I came with. And the 5 boxes that I came with were in the back of my Explorer I had at that time. I had an Explorer that was upside down with debt, and I didn't have a job because I just sold my business to get out of it. And so I was really in sad shape at that point. And I was standing on it was October of 1995, I think it was. Yeah, October 1995. And I was crashing on the couch of a friend's house, and Hurricane Opal came roaring up through the Gulf of Mississippi, the Gulf of Mexico, and came right on into Atlanta, where I was living, with tornadoes and high winds, and in the middle of the night I heard the branches of the trees slamming against the window, and my friend came running downstairs. He was in his boxer shorts and I had on a pair of sweatpants, and we ran out and stood on the front porch and watched the wind whipping around, and my friend said, David, you need to go move your truck because it's sitting right there. That tree doesn't look all that stable. And I looked over just in time to see that tree fall and crush my truck with everything in it. So we stood there and we looked at each other, and we burst into laughter because I had $11 in my pocket, and that was it. That's all I owned, $11 in my pocket and $256,000 in unsecured debt from my business. And my friend said, you, we laughed, and he said, you are the freest man I know, which in some sense is true. When you got nothing, you're incredibly free. It's not a comfortable place to be, but no responsibilities, no anything else. You just got to figure out where your next meal's coming from. And from that moment forward, I've always known that, you know, I can do anything because I've been there. So I know that anything above that is better. And when I did my honest self-appraisal, I, like you, found that I had a lot of areas about myself that I believed were true, which everybody else were telling me was not true. Or some things that were true that I needed to fix or dump or change. And it's really important that you embrace what you discover in that self-appraisal, because that clears the path for you, for the good stuff to come in, and for you to highlight what's good about what you want to keep and what you want to discard. My wife talks about it with, she says, like it's a grocery store that does inventory every week, you know, and they determine what's selling and what's not selling, and you take the bad stuff off the shelf that's not selling so that you can make room for the good stuff that comes in. And that's exactly what this is about. It is, and we do it in business, right? If we're not determining,
Absolutely.
If we're not determining,
well, hopefully we do.
Yeah.
Hopefully we do. You know, a lot of people, they don't take inventory of their business, and then they wonder what. Connie mentioned this last night. She said, if I do something and it doesn't work, then I don't do it anymore. If it works, I do more of it. So. Yeah,
it's such a simple concept. How many of us don't get that, though, until you're forced to get it? Because if, you know, I can tell you forever I did things that didn't work, thinking, oh, someday it's going to work. You know, and I think we call that insanity, don't we?
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, it's interesting because a lot of times when people hear something like this where, you know, make the choice to change, they think it's going to be easy.
Oh,
And I know that there were changes in my life I had to make going from that place of truly, truly, truly being unemployable. I mean, I could not get a job to save my life, and my life reflected that at the time. And today, I look at my life and go, oh my gosh, this is amazing. It's a miracle. And yet the changes that I made sometimes were so painful. It was because I was so used to the old behavior. And so sometimes that embracing what we discover, willingness to act on it, and making a commitment, it's not always the easiest thing to do. It's very simple, but it's not always easy. And yet it's looking at what kind of life do we want to create for ourselves.
well, and it never ends. Once you start doing it, it never ends because you can't
Right,
afford to let
right.
it end. I mean, if you do stop doing all of this, then you go backwards. Um,
Absolutely. And going backwards is even more painful than
oh
when we were
boy,
in it before.
because now
And I
you
do want to
know.
encourage people to, excuse me, I just wanted to say I want to encourage people to send questions in. We've had several people who have, and we will take time to have David answer those questions. So be sure to send your questions in through the question box.
So this is how you're beginning to get a clue of what's it, because these things on this inventory, not only will you see that some of these things are beginning to resonate with you, but some of them are not beginning to resonate, or some of them are resonating in a bad way. They're giving you bad feelings, and that's the key. So how do you know? You trust your feelings, Luke. Remember that from the Star Wars movie? I felt like Star Wars was it was probably the first spiritual wake-up call that I got, because I had been
Hmm.
looking forever. And there's so much in that movie that is about the universal source. Trust your feelings, find the force, da-da-da-da, all that stuff. And to me, that was really important. Um, but the feelings that I look for in now are the fulfillment, the joy, energy, being relaxed, even if I'm busy, being relaxed, and being enthusiastic about it. If I'm not enthusiastic about doing whatever I'm doing, then the two things have to happen. Either I don't do it anymore, or I find somebody else to do it if it needs to be done. And that last piece right there, I think, is really important, because there's a lot of stuff in my business, Kathleen, I don't know about yours, but in mine, there's a lot of stuff I don't want to do.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
it's got to be done, though.
Mm-hmm.
And I can find somebody else to do it. And I want them to be fulfilled and enthusiastic and energetic about it, about doing it. But if they take it on as a job and they're not quite as spiritually evolved, or I don't even want to call it spiritually evolved, they're not quite as in touch with their purpose in life, but they need the money, I'm happy to pay them to do that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
One of the things I discovered in my inventory was that laughter became a huge part of my spiritual experience. And I'll tell you why. I am at my core a very angry person and very self-centered. And that comes from being very fearful about a lot of stuff. Now, we've talked about this previously about being in control and wanting to win and always being right and all of that stuff. That's based on fear to me. And I can tell, this happened to me this week. I went into a situation where all of a sudden I got irritated. Just at the snap of a finger, I got irritated, and I could feel the chemicals in my body shifting. And you know how you get that rush of heat that goes through your
Mm-hmm.
system?
Mm-hmm.
And I used to be the kind of person who would explode in anger sometimes. And I don't do that anymore because I've learned how to control that piece and to change it. And I do it with laughter in some cases. But one of the things that happens is I started feeling that boiling. And it really is a boiling that happens in your blood. I mean, I felt the heat coming up. And when that would happen to me, I started doing something, which was I'd listen to Richard Pryor, or Jeff Foxworthy, or somebody on, or Andy Griffith on if I can get to a what do you call it, Mayberry.
Mm-hmm.
If I can get to the Andy Griffith show on TV quickly, I'll be laughing in 30 seconds, and my chemicals have changed again. I'm feeling great. And I know how to change the chemicals in my body just through laughter. So understanding that feeling and what you're feeling, the fulfillment, the joy, the energetic, relaxed and enthusiastic, and being able to control that and keep that in front of you all the time. Those are the things I try to put in my life every day.
And may I interject something here?
Sure.
Okay. I'm really glad you brought that up about, that you have that boiling point. And I think sometimes when we're on our spiritual path, we think we should never get angry again. I had something happen recently. It was yesterday, as a matter of fact, that just pushed every button I have, and I was angry, and I was like, how dare they, and yada, 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 yada. And then I thought, okay, stop and pray. And that's what I do. I pray for the other person. I pray for myself. May my heart be gentle. And this is a side of myself that some people that are listening in right now may not realize. That's a huge part of how I function in my life. Is if I feel an old behavior or a feeling coming up that is just not going to serve me, I have tools that I can use that help me to work through that. And I think sometimes we expect too much of ourselves as spiritual beings having a human experience. We expect that we should be perfect in everything we do, and we're not. We have these emotions that come up, whether it be in business. Somebody might send a message saying, I think you're sending too many emails to me, and I might say, well, how dare you? Don't you know that my information is great? And it's like, wait a minute. They're entitled to their experience. I'm entitled to mine. And what can I do to get myself centered? We had a question that came through from Nancy that I'd love to ask you at this point, because I think it fits very nicely in what we're talking about right now. She writes, hi, Dave. What format did you use for doing a self-appraisal? Can you describe more of what you were doing with that, please?
Okay, sure. It is a simple thing is what I do. I write it down on a piece of paper. It's kind of a pros and cons thing. I always try to identify the good things about me and the bad things about me, the things I'd like to change or the things I'd like to keep. Let's call it that. Things I'd like to change, things I'd like to keep. The things I'd like to change, well, let's back up one, because there are things that are eating my lunch. Those are the ones that I identify first. What are the things that are eating my lunch? I had one, I can honestly say today that there's nobody in the world that I detest. Nobody. There was one man, though, until 10 years ago, that I detested, and I would say hate, from the time I was 17 until I was 48 or 9. And that was my baseball coach in high school. He was also our neighbor when we lived in the country. His house backed up to our house. We shared a field, and his cows grazed in our field. I gave the guy a ride to work every day. He was the teacher, and I gave him a ride to work every day. And when I was a senior, I had been a pretty good baseball player and had, in the recreation leagues, had done really well. He cut me from the team when I was a senior. I was planning on getting a scholarship that year, and he cut me from the high school team. And nobody could understand it, and I was just devastated. And but I held it against him forever because of that. And one day I was telling my dad about this about 10 years ago, that I still held a grudge against this guy. And he said, well, that didn't have anything to do with you. He was mad because I started charging him to put his cows in our field $50 for the hay. And that made him mad, and he cut you. I never knew that story. I never knew the circumstances, and I felt sorry for him that he took it out on me for that reason. And I was able to let that go. But I was able to let that go because on this piece of paper that I'm writing, I wrote down what was eating my lunch, what was my resentment, what my part was in that. Now you think you would think that my part in that is small because he did it to me. But the truth is, I held on to it, and I held on to it, and I held on to it until it was affecting my entire life. I always had somebody I could go back and touch, like a hot flame. I'd go back and touch it and say, oh, yeah, that's still hot. And I could pay attention to that. I had to let go of that. And so now, it doesn't bother me at all what happened about that. And, in fact, I played baseball until I was 48. Now, another thing that happened was I made myself out to be a much better baseball player than I ever was. And I had to look at that. Why is it that I wanted to be better than I was? And I had to write those things down on a piece of paper. Then I write down what's my part in it and what was the result of it. So really it's a 3-column format for me. Write it down. What's my part? What's the result? And then, of course, the 4th column for me is how do I get rid of it? And then I write in there, how do I get rid of it? And what are going to be the benefits of getting rid of it? And that's something that really works for me, because then once you do it, once you do those things, and I don't know about your practice, but my practice is to actually to take that, and then I don't keep that piece of paper because I let it go. When I let it go, I let it go. I hand it off to my source, and I'm done with it. You take this trash out for me, and we're going to dump that. And if I come back to it, I'm going to remember that I gave it to you. It's not mine anymore. Does that make sense?
So it's a conscious effort. It's a conscious effort.
Oh, very conscious.
It's kind of like the New Year burning bowl ceremony that I've participated in through our spiritual center, where we write down something we really want to just let go of, and then it actually goes into a burning bowl, and it's gone.
Yep.
It's gone.
Yep. Very conscious effort. Absolutely.
And have another question that came in from Christina, and it is, can you talk to the idea of striking a balance? I've heard other internet marketers say a mistake they made was that they tried a lot of things, but yet they never gave any one thing a chance long enough to take effect. So can you address that about having the balance in business to really let something work?
Sure. That goes to the commitment piece to me. I have to know that I've given things a full effort, and that I have given it a chance, really. Now, my tendency in my previous life was to push it and push it and push it and not let go of it. You're going to see a slide later, and I'll just say it here. One of the things that has been key in my life is to surrender when it's time to give up. And to be able to surrender, people say surrender is a weakness. That's a big misconception in our world, that surrender is a weakness. I heard something not long ago that I love, and that is surrender is joining the winning side. That's what I do today. I surrender and I join the winning side. So when something is not working and I've given it a really fair shot, like that process I just told you about, I let it go. And then I move on to something. I'm sure I learned something from that. Here's another example. NAMS, my NAMS, which is the bulk of my business right now, my NAMS was not even a glimmer when I developed NAMS. So NAMS was the big deal. NAMS is still a big deal. The workshop is a big deal. But my NAMS is the piece of my business that grew out of that, even though I didn't intend it to. So even though things don't sometimes work the way I want them to work, I have to be open to seeing what's next out of that, because often it will lead me to the next thing.
And it's being open to that. It's being open to, it's like myself in the last 2 years. I honestly sometimes wonder, how did my business keep going, for one thing, and growing? We actually, in this last year, we grew by, I think it was 8%. And it was during a time that I had so much going on personally, and a lot of it was I surrendered. And I said, okay, God, source, higher power, I call it my higher power, God. And I said, God, I cannot do this myself. I need guidance. Give me help. And I would get these ideas, and I would implement the ideas, and one thing grew into another. And my business model has changed quite a bit in the last 2 years compared to what it was 3 years ago. And a lot of it was I had something I had to respond to, which was the needs of my parents at the time, and specifically my mother. And I had a choice. I could say, oh, no, I'm too busy. I just don't have the time. You know, she'll have to figure it out herself while she's laying in a hospital bed. But I said, no, God, I know what I need to do. I need to be there for my mother. And I have a household I'm responsible for also. And I was given these ideas, these intuitive thoughts, and it was my choice what I did with those. And did I always make the right choice? No, not always, but most of the time I did. And the more I surrender, and the more I look at my bracelet that says faith, and the more I turn it over, the easier my life becomes. It's very, very simple.
Yeah, and I completely agree with that. And Kathleen, I guarantee you that you had probably 1,000 ideas a week, and you acted on maybe a half dozen. And
Yes.
you have to be discerning about the ideas that you have because they're not all good, right?
Well, excuse me.
No, I'm sorry. Yours are all good. Yours are all good. Mine are not all
Now
good.
that everybody knows my ideas are not always good, but it's true. It's true. It's being able to again, the whole thing with balance is the more experience we get with life, hopefully we get wisdom with that, and we can make better choices.
Yeah, so I have a huge idea for I did 20 years of newspaper, right? And so I did newspaper and magazine and publishing, and I know that business inside out. And and part of me is sad about newspapers going away, and the other part of me is we saw it coming. Why didn't they do something about it when they saw it coming in 1975? But they didn't. And so now I'm very excited about creating an online publishing empire for niche marketing stuff, for niche information products, let's say. And the reason for that is because I see a new model. It's a huge idea, and I'm building it a little bit at a time. And I'm building it with pieces that work, not pieces that don't work, because I discard those. Sometimes I try them and I discard them. Some niche mall didn't work in the first incarnation. And the reason it didn't work in the first incarnation was because I didn't build in enough value to the members. And so I brought it back after it got creamed by the hacker. And by the way, now I can say thank you to him because it's back in a better incarnation, and it's back with much, much more value, and it's easier to use. So, who knows?
And you just hit on something, David, about saying thank you to even those people in those situations that are really tough as we're going through them. It's as we get through whatever it is we're going to get through, those were the pieces of the puzzle that needed to be put in place for us to become who we are to become. And if we resent what's going on, we're not going to grow in the way that we are truly intended to grow. If we embrace it and bless it, even though it's tough, I mean, there are things that, we all go through that are extremely, extremely tough, and yet it's in the blessing of those situations that we emerge to be our full self.
Right.
That is my belief, and it works in my life very nicely.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. It's like I said earlier, I've never had, I'll say two things. I've never had a problem that didn't turn out to be a blessing in some sense, ever. And the second thing is, if there is a problem, let me put it this way. If I'm not the problem, there's no solution because I can't change anything else.
Love that.
So this page shows what is not it, and you know when it's not it. I mean, you go to work and you're tense, you dread going in, you're angry, you're resentful, you're disturbed. My goal these days is to be the least disturbed person I know. That's it. And so I pay attention to what I'm feeling. 2002, I'm going to talk about that year for a second because it's a pivotal point in my life. My daughter just went through something that is huge in her. She had a job for 14 years and she lost that job. And she and I talked a lot about this because I said, this is a point in your life where you can look at this and you can put a stake in the ground and you'll come back to it and later on and you will say, wow, that was exactly what I needed at that point. And it is. When you're living it, it's scary as it can be. In 2002, I did that pager thing that I told you about, but all of the things were conspiring in that spring to get me out of Dodge, basically. I had been saying for a year, I was 49 that year. I had been saying 50 and out, 50 and out. I wanted to retire at 50. I wanted to be 50 years old and retire. Get out of the corporate consulting world, because I absolutely detested what I was doing. And what happened was the company that I was contracting through went out of business. So I was out. It wasn't the way I wanted to get out, but I was going to be out. It was a 27-mile, hour-and-a-half commute to where I was going every day. So 3 hours a day I was on the road on I-285 in Atlanta, bumper-to-bumper traffic, mad as hell most of the time because people are crazy drivers. That was my perception. People are crazy drivers. My wife, I did the pager from hell that spring. You know, that was when I sent the message to the woman. And then my wife got sick. I've been married 4 years, found the woman of my dreams, and she still is, and I love our relationship because we have a spiritual relationship. She got cancer that spring, and they found it very early, and it was surgically cured. They were able to get rid of it, so she didn't have to chemo or any of that kind of stuff. But it was all an indicator to us that you know, something had to change. We were not living it at that point. And that's when we took a leap of faith. We sold our house. We sold everything we had. We moved to Alabama to be closer to her mother, who was older at that point, and still is around and still older and healthy. And we moved in with her. She had a 2-bedroom condo. We moved in with her. We had no idea what was next. And what we had to do was trust that the next thing was coming. The right next thing was coming. And what happened was we ended up with a piece of land that was an incredible deal, 100 acres, and I had time to build a house, and so I built the house. At the end of building that house, I searched for 6 months, thinking, well, I'm in North Alabama. Huntsville's a good technology center. I'll be able to get whatever kind of consulting. This was before I was doing online business. I'll be able to get some kind of consulting job there. I sent out 300 resumes, got 1 interview, and nothing. 6 months, nothing. And so finally I said, okay, I'm done. I'm not looking for a job anymore. If there's a job for me, bring it on. And the next day, my old client in Atlanta called me and said, we've got a merger that's happening. Would you like to come help with that? So I drove back and forth to Atlanta for 18 months and made 3 times the money that I was making when I was there. But the funny thing, Kathleen, is I went back to the same building, to the same cube that I was sitting in before I left, when I hated it, and I loved it when I went back because my perception had changed. I was doing work that was meaningful, that was fun, and I was a different person. So it's not always what we're doing. It's how we see it.
It's our perception, as you said.
It's our perception. So I test everything I do now against those criteria. Is this something that brings me pleasure, good feelings, put a smile on your face, or is it something that disturbs you and causes you anxiety? It's simple. Everything I do runs through that test. And now that you know this, what's stopping you from doing it? This is what stopped me from doing it, even when I knew it. And this was the fear of the unknown. You know, it's the devil that you know is worse than the one you don't, right? What will other people think? I mean, when I moved in with my mother-in-law at the age of 50, not knowing what was next, you know, I had no idea what I was doing, but I was certainly concerned about what other people thought. And it turned out to be exactly what I needed. Plus, I got to spend a year with my mother-in-law while I built this house, who I learned to love and enjoy. And then I can go back to all that misery if I want to, but, you know, that's a choice, like I said earlier. Worry, control, need to be right. Those are the things that affect me. You may have things that that are more your problem. How do you make the change? Burn the boats. You heard the story about the general who brings his troops on land, and they turn around and they see their boats are burning, and he says, now there's no escape. You can burn the boats. That's what I did. I jumped to Alabama, and I burned my boats. That can be really brave, or it can be really stupid. If I had kids to feed at that point, it would have been really stupid, because probably a better move is to do a planned transition. Sometimes you don't have any choice about the burn the boats. If you get fired or laid off in this economy, the boats have been burned for you. So you have to get over the panic and be open to what's next, and that's what happens. So the gradual planned transition is a better idea in most cases. That's where you've got your job and you're working to build a business online, and as the money from the online business gets bigger and bigger. You can start cutting back on your job and maybe your focus, or maybe you have to quit. Dave and Mary Morris are going to be our first morning speakers for the beginning crowd at the NAMS workshop. And Dave and Mary were both project managers in jobs at the corporate jobs. They were over 50, and they weren't really excited about doing that job that they were doing. And they built a website about front porches and what you can do with front porches. Now that's a really tight niche, but they did their research and they built a niche website that had great advertising capability. They built up the traffic, and they were able to quit their jobs in 18 months, both of them.
Wow.
And be completely supported.
In a very niche market. That's amazing.
In a very niche market.
Amazing.
And by the way, they've been students for a couple of years as well from us, as well as Lynn Terry and a couple other people.
And myself,
and
Mary
yourself.
has been one of my students. And I really want to emphasize the point you just made, because years ago I worked for GTE Health Systems, and we had an impending layoff coming. And I mean, it was so obvious. It was talked about. People knew it was coming. But the day that it happened, there were people that were going, what happened? I can't believe I just lost my job. And
right.
They knew for months and months and months. And most people never prepared for it, where if they would have kept their eyes open, they would have seen what was coming, and they could have prepared for what comes next. What you just said is so important for people to hear, because I hear people talk black and white. It's like either I do a job or I do internet marketing. You can do both if you grow into it, like Mary and Dave did. They grew into it. And so for those people who are in a situation right now where it really isn't serving you or the life's work that you want to do, add things to it gradually. And affiliate marketing is a great way to add to, but it doesn't have to be black and white. You don't have to quit your job to start doing internet marketing. You can do, even if it's an hour a day or a half hour a day, you're doing something.
That's right.
But what I see a lot of people do is they talk about what they want to do, and then they spend time watching TV going, it's not working. It's like,
mm-hmm.
Well, it's not working because you're not working it.
Mm-hmm. And the other thing is, that's one of the reasons we built the niche mall into the membership site that we have, is because people say, well, I don't have a website, I don't have a list, I don't have this or that. Everybody's got Facebook, everybody's got Twitter, everybody's got social media, everybody's got followers. And everybody can have a free blog at WordPress.com or Blogger or whatever. And what we've done is give people the infrastructure in the niche mall, so that all you have to do is send them to a sales page already, and you're making 100% commissions instantly into your PayPal account. So, you can have a business that brings you money today with that.
And
system.
you'll be talking about that before we close today, won't
you? Sure.
Okay.
Not in depth. That wasn't really my plan. So.
Okay. Well, then I'll just send people information on that.
Yeah. So the other thing is, you can wait for the right time. When in doubt, do nothing. That was a really hard thing for me to learn. Is I thought that I needed to fix everything right now. I have this dream of going around the United States on a motorcycle, doing stories of inspiration, one from each state. I've got it all planned out. I've got it written down, and I wrote the plan in 2000. Actually, I wrote the plan in 1998, and I've got an entire spreadsheet built out on cost and all that kind of stuff, and PowerPoint presentation. I was a hair's breadth from having Coca-Cola sponsor the entire thing in 1998. But the deal was, digital cameras were so big, digital video was so big, blogs were not even, WordPress was not something that was easy or capable to do. I would have needed a Winnebago to follow me around on my motorcycle, basically, right? And now I can get all of that into a fanny pack, pretty much. And I can do it today easily. And the other thing I was trying to figure out was, where am I going to stay? I'd have to get Marriott hotels or somebody to sponsor me to be able to do that. And that's true. I could still do that. But because of NAMS and my NAMS, I can go anywhere in the country and have members or instructors or people that I could actually bunk with if I wanted to.
Absolutely. You got a place outside of Eugene, Oregon waiting for you.
And it's been a blessing to wait and do nothing and watch this thing unfold. All I got to do now is jump on it and go. So that's that. The other thing is a motorcycle analogy here. Always look where you're going. One of the things you learn when you ride motorcycles is they tell you to look into the curve, because you're going to turn into the curve if you're looking into it. If you look at a tree, if you look at the yellow line, whatever you're looking at on a motorcycle, you're going to drift that way. So if you look at the yellow line on a motorcycle, you're going to find yourself in the middle of the road. And that's not a great thing to do. It's really interesting how that works. It's the concept of the fighter pilot who looks to where he's going to fly as well. He turns his head and the plane goes that direction. It's something that I have to remember is I have to look where I'm going, which means I keep a vision in front of me, a vision and a mission. And those two things are important to have in front of me. Surrender to the winning side. I said this. That's my wife right there pointing to a sign that is over our back door. Simplify. That is our goal. Simplify everything. People that know me know I can be really complex. I like to design systems, and systems can be really complex. The simpler they are, the easier it is and the less stress that they are. And that's the key, keeping it simple. And then the easiest way to keep everything simple is to surrender to what's happening, joining the winning side. Not now. I mean, now, not now. The key to change is to change only what's happening now. You know, you try to change what you did in the past, that's revisionist history. And, you know, everybody knows. I talked earlier about making myself out to be a better baseball player than I was. That was in my head. People who played baseball with me knew that I was a good baseball player. They knew I was not going to get a scholarship. They knew that I believed I was, but they knew that I wasn't that good. If you miss the present, I think you're missing life. If you're living in the future, it may or may not happen. If you're living in the past, it already did, and it's just data. So you got to be fully engaged in what's going on right now. And you got to remember that right now, everything is always okay. I don't care what you're going through, it is always okay. If you're breathing and sleeping, and you're always okay. The other thing is to impact either of those, you have to act now. Action only happens now. Yesterday's gone, it's data, like I said, and tomorrow isn't here, so it's only projection. Now, in business, those are two really important concepts. The past, the data piece of it is really important. This is my redirect panel. It shows the links that I drive traffic through. You can see some of those are getting a lot of traffic. Some of them have great 24-hour trends on the traffic. Some have traffic that is way down. This is data that tells me what's working and what's not working, where I need to focus. And we talked earlier about looking at the past, examine it, use it, and then let it go. You know, if there are things I can learn from the past in my business, I use it and then I let it go. And I don't romance it anymore. That whole thing about the baseball is an example of romancing it, and I don't do that. This is a bad one for me. The don't fondle it, twirling it around until it's your precious, like you know, Gollum talked about with the ring. I can look at something that happened in the past and just hold on to it and examine it from every side and build it up into something that it's not. It might have been a piece of cow dung, and all of a sudden I've got it looking like a piece of gold, because if I'd only done this or only done that, or maybe I could, or it's somebody else's fault, or, you know, all of those things. And I just have to let that stuff go and not play that woulda, coulda, shoulda game. And we talked about revising history, and that past performance does not predict future results. If you have any investments, they always what do they call it? Caveat your purchases with that kind of statement. Past performance does not predict future results, but it sure can give you a good insight into where you want to go. And the last thing I say is get over it. It is the past. You know, you just got to get over it, whatever it was. You know, if I wanted to sit around and think about how bad my life was in 1995 and how I got dumped out on the street, basically, and I was a victim and I was this and I was that, well, first off, none of that's true. Everything that happened because of the parts that I played in it. But the second thing is, you know, so what? It's not now. Get over it. The future, here's a couple of my favorite quotes about the future. Your actions speak so loudly, I can't hear what you're saying. That's by Emerson. That is not so much a future statement as it is a present statement. This is one I used with my kids. I printed this out and put it beside their beds every day so that they would look at it every day. Your actions speak so loudly, I can't hear what you're saying. And if you think about that, what are you telling people by the way you act? I think that's a really important thing to remember. And the other quote is, I've had thousands of problems in my life, most of which never actually happened. That's Mark Twain. And that was me too. I could think about every bad thing that was going to happen, and almost nothing ever did.
Right.
Just as every decision you made in the past led to where you are, every decision you make today impacts tomorrow. That's how you impact the future. What you're doing today, acting, and the choices you're making today really changes your future. And every successful businessman, I heard about Thomas Watson not long ago on, I think I was listening to the E-Myth, and Michael Gerber was saying that Thomas Watson, the founder of IBM, was being interviewed, and they asked him how he knew that he was building a great business. And he said, because every day we looked at what we wanted this business to be, what we did yesterday that impacted us not achieving that goal of being the business we wanted it to be, and how we could make changes today that would help us be the business we wanted to be tomorrow. And that's what a business is. A business has to really look at the data that it has and follow the vision that you've designed. It's really important.
So every day take those steps that will move you toward what your goals are.
And only those steps.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I get distracted by too much stuff, There's stuff that other people want me to do, but I need to do my stuff first.
Right.
So we talked about insanity, living in the past or future, revisit our misery. This is something my wife told me long ago, and I love it. If you're going through hell, don't take pictures.
I love that. I love that.
Why would you take pictures and put those in your album?
What I did over the summer, it was hell.
That's right. And why worry about tomorrow? The worst will probably not happen.
Right.
Okay, the best way to live in now with it. Serve it now. These are the 4 things that I find incredibly important. Faith, commitment, plan, and focus. And we've really talked a lot about these things. I can't emphasize being committed to something and following your plan those are really 2 important things to do. And you need to do all of these things. The faith that I'm talking about is not, like I said before, any religious faith. It is faith in your idea, faith in your source, faith in your abilities. It's just having faith. It's almost like being an optimist,
Mm-hmm.
And then focusing. This is key. I can't tell you how key this is. This will determine how quickly you get to where you want to go. Is how well you can focus. I've struggled with that all my life, and I'm better and better and better at it. But it still is it's still the thing that I need every day to get myself focused and to stay focused.
I have a question that came in from Denise that I think is very appropriate for this point in the conversation.
Sure.
How do you know the difference between what you're good at and your calling?
So the reason I'm hesitating is because I have a whole game that we're going to play at the workshop on this. It's called Prosperity Scrabble.
Okay.
And I'll tell you how this game works. And this is how I came to this motorcycle trip around the United States. In my mind, what I did was, and this is not my game. This is a game that was developed by Frederick Lehrman, who's a prosperity coach out of California. And I think he only did the one series on prosperity, and I think it's a jewel. It's called Prosperity Consciousness by Frederick Lehrman, Lehrman. And this was like 15 years ago that I did this. You write down everything you're good at on one piece of paper. You write down everything you love to do on another piece of paper. Then you cut them up into 2 piles. You cut those things up individually into 2 piles, and you start picking one from each pile. And you start just kind of randomly and serendipitously looking at matching those things. What I'm good at, what I love to do. What I'm good at, what I love to do. And for me, one of the things that I wrote down was I'm a good travel writer and photographer. I've done that in my life. I love to do that. But I know I'm good at that. What I loved to do was ride motorcycles. I loved my Harley. At this time in my life, that was I didn't have a car. All I had was a Harley. And so I'm writing these things down, and those 2 things came up: travel, writer and photographer, and riding motorcycles. And I looked at that and I thought, oh, I could take a trip around the United States and do a inspirational book about people in different locations, and create a really nice business around this, where people would pay me for the book. And so I went into depth and figured it out and did all that. And that little idea all of a sudden jumped out. Now, that was not the calling piece of it. But as I looked at it and examined it, what I realized was the calling was inspiration. I love inspirational articles. I love inspirational biographies. I read all the time. I love people who have overcome adversity. I love people who have built something out of nothing, and all of a sudden I realized that's my calling. My calling is to enable inspirational stories, and that does it. Now, the calling became larger than just the motorcycle trip with the book and the pictures and the writing. The calling became service to people to enable them to do great things. Right? Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense. And it's like, don't get caught up in the details, just look at the essence of what the calling is. Because if left to my own devices, if I try to figure out all the details, I'm going to shortchange myself. Left to source, I will be amazed at what the results will be.
And I'm absolutely convinced that this is going to happen soon on the motorcycle thing.
Oh, I'm sure it will. I expect to see that Harley drive up to a little ranchette anytime soon.
I got so caught up in the details on that thing, I thought, I need somebody who is a weather person who can help me route around the United States so I have the best weather all the time. And
it's called weather.com.
Yeah, it is. But when I started looking at this, it was a guy in a forum who was a weather meteorologist for the United States Air Force, and he said, I can help you with that.
Interesting.
So there you go.
Interesting.
It all is going to work.
Okay.
Okay, so the last piece that we haven't talked about, which is the then love it. Now that you've identified it, now that you're working in the now, then love it. Once you know that this is something you want to spend time on, pour the love on it. Think about it, dream about it, write about it, and hold it up there as something that just gives you great joy. And in this sense, love is not just a goo-goo eyes kind of thing. It is taking action with love. It's not static. It's got to keep moving and keep serving. So, the whole thing for me in this calling was that NAMS became the thing that I loved because it enables and empowers people to do great things. We have probably 10 students who have been to every one of these workshops who started with nothing, no website or anything, and I've got 4 of them this time that are instructors at the workshop because their businesses are doing so well, and they're great inspirations to people. Yeah. I mean, in 3 years.
Well, one of the things that you did at NAMS to show people, because a lot of times people say, well, I don't have a list so I can't make money, or I don't have a product so I can't make money. At NAMS, we actually had a real-time experience where people who had never sold anything actually made money from a training that took place there. We developed the product right there and then. The landing page was put up, and some only had their Facebook friends to send it to, or Twitter people, and they made money. And they're like, oh my gosh, this really works. And one of the things I know about all of what you've talked about today is Whatever we focus on, we get more of. If we say we can't do something, we're certainly right. We cannot
Absolutely.
do it. If we believe we can and we know that there's a way, it will manifest and appear before us. And one of the things that I'm reading Wayne Dyer's book, Real Magic, again for probably the 4th time.
Mm-hmm.
And in it, he talks about don't look for the miracles, look for the signposts.
Mm.
What are the signposts?
Mm-hmm.
And we've got quite a few questions that came through. So in just a few moments, I want to invite people again to send in questions, because Dave and I will stick around and answer those questions. And so before we do, Dave, I'd love to hear more of what you had to say.
We have one more slide to go, and then that's it. What I wanted to say about this was that once you identify it, you got to honor it, practice it, and feel it, and be grateful. Now, Charlesa, that's my wife there. That was Monday night at the national championship game in the Superdome, and Charlesa loves Alabama football. She grew up in Alabama. She went to Alabama. She has 2 degrees from Alabama. Alabama football is just her passion. Now, she's a beautiful woman and a great singer. She's been an opera singer for 14 years, and she has more passion for football than anything else in her life. So when I started this whole NAMS business, she decided that she was going to blog about football. So she created a website called SouthernGirlsCollegeFootballGuide.com. And she teaches women about football and about college football in the South particularly. So because we have such passion and love for football, she does, and I have jumped in, we're doing things that we never thought we would do. We've been to 2 national championships. We went in Pasadena and we went to Super Bowl. And we have a great time because we're pouring all this love on her passion. That's how that works. Okay, so how to use this in business? First question is, are you happy at work? You know, I told you I went back to my cubicle in 2003, and I changed my perception. And that was what the key was to me, was changing the perception. I didn't change the job. I changed the perception. And if you are not happy at work, I really encourage you to go through that inventory that we talked about and look at what your perceptions are and how you can change it. And if there's a problem there, the problem is you. I guarantee you, the problem is you. Do what you want. Are you adding value? Are you giving great service? Are you giving a fair deal if you have a business? That's just key to me. You cannot big deal people out of their money and not offer them the value that is at least 10 times their money, because that's the way good businesses operate. You know, I used to love Nordstrom's because you could take anything back to Nordstrom's whether you bought it there or not, and they'd refund your money. They were dedicated to offering that kind of service. And your integrity, always, always, always keep your integrity to the top of your list. It is really important. Integrity, your reputation and your integrity is what you protect and what you build, because that's where people will, that's how they come to know you. And we do that at NAMS. This is Terry Dean teaching in the advanced room at NAMS, and that was an incredible session. It was. I was blown away by the quality of his information. That all of us, we were advanced students. Even though I was an instructor, I still went in as a student to some of the sessions, and everybody in there was just blown by his content. Yep. And that's the other thing I'm talking about. When I said, are you adding value? He gave so much content there, so much actionable content, and we encourage everybody at NAMS to do that, so that students who come will just be overwhelmed by the amount of actionable content. But the other thing about NAMS is it's an hour of instruction. For most workshops, it's an hour of instruction and then an hour to an hour and a half of implementation. So you don't go away and have to figure this out on your own. You do what you're learning at the event. That's really important to us. And the NAMS is my calling. That's what I wanted to get to, was NAMS is my calling, with 300 people, 4 tracks, 30 instructors, 3 to 5 days, depending on how much of it you opt in for. And Kathleen, if people want to go and find out more about it, they can go to this link, which is nams.ws, that's my redirect link, and it's Do It Now KG. and that is all lowercase, and it is for it's your affiliate link, Kathleen, of course. That's part of the integrity piece and part of the reward. That's how we all do this together, is reward each other for introducing us to other people that we really want to be friends with.
I just put it in the chat area where if people want to look there, it's a clickable link and it should take them right to the NAMS page.
Great. So that's it. I'm ready for questions.
Okay, let me start with one that comes from our dear friend Kathy, who is from Canada. What can you share about how to deal with overwhelm and the paralysis it can create? Kathy Demers.
Simplify. And by saying simplify, focus on one thing and master it. Kathy, that is a really hard thing for me to do too, because I want to be good at everything. But you know, Kathleen taught my students not long ago about Kindle publishing. That is a very focused technique and something that we are going to push as digital publishing becomes more and more important. And the students, I told them then that what they need to do is put everything else aside, focus on Kindle publishing. If you're interested in Kindle publishing, learn how to do that, get that under your belt, go forward with it, make it work, then go to the next thing. That's the only way I think you can implement stuff and make it work.
And I want to share a strategy that worked for me in the last couple of years, because quite seriously, most people have no idea how taxing things were for me. I was driving 500 miles to and from where my mother was, and I did this for a couple of years, where I would stay down there for sometimes weeks at a time and sometimes months at a time. And there were points where I was near breaking. I mean, I emotionally, spiritually, physically, I was just near breaking. And it was those times where I would literally get on my knees and I would pray and I'd say, God, I cannot do this. I can't go on another day. And somehow I would get the strength to do it. But it was also during that time that I really learned to focus and get rid of the things that were time wasters and just busy work, because I just could not afford to be there taking care of my mother and running my business and having all this frivolous activity. And that was also when I really started outsourcing a lot more. Sometimes for me, the answer is just get on my knees and say, I just can't do this anymore. And that's as transparent as I can get about what has worked in my life. And it's amazing that when I have that kind of surrender, what clarity comes. And is it easy all the time? No, and sometimes very, very painful. But when I get out of my own way, then things seem to clear up and I gain clarity. So.
And there's one other thing I would tell people too about the overwhelm piece, is that one of the things that's worked for me, and I'm talking tactics here, not I do what you do as well, Kathleen, but just specific tactics for how to organize and prioritize. I use a tool that I put task in, and then I schedule those tasks. And it's a very simple tool, and it has a little deadline timer on it. I give myself an hour to do a blog post, let's say, or an hour to set up a sales page that has to be set up or whatever. And when I'm really, really overwhelmed, I adhere to that tool religiously, so that all day long I've got these little bells going off in the background, and I start the next task when the bell goes off. And if you want to, that's a cheap tool that I use and I sell. And if you want to know more about that, just send me an email or a link here that you can contact. Do you mind if I give them an email address, Kathleen?
Please, go ahead.
It's david@mynams.com. That's mynams.com. david@mynams.com. And I'll send you a link to that.
And here's some specific stuff about NAMS. Adrian writes, Kathleen, I went to NAMS for the first time in August thanks to Connie. It was a wonderful experience. I can't wait to get back in February.
Oh,
excellent.
Good.
And Greg writes, David is spot on with this information. Sophisticated is a lot of simple. Strive for simple. How do I learn more about this product that he is releasing soon?
Oh, you're talking about the niche mall?
Probably so.
Yeah, the niche mall is going to be inside of our NAMS membership site. You can, let's see, they should go to this link. If you're interested in coming to the workshop, you can go to this link that is on the screen right now, and that gives you 3 months into the workshop. You can go to mynams.com www.niche-mall, and that will take you to the Niche Mall page. Only members at MyNAMS will have an affiliate sales link. It's a catalog page there, though, and you'll see what it looks like, and you can browse the catalog. And that will be up and available to people on Friday.
Okay, great. And then Julian writes, what about joining NAMS? I can't make it to the event this time. How does it work? Benefits and what can we contribute?
There's a couple of ways to do this. They can go to, Kathleen, do you have a link for the membership site as well without the event?
You know, I don't have it right now, but I can send it to people.
Okay. We'll have Kathleen do that for you, because you can actually go to the site through her link and get join the membership site, which is, by the way, right now only $14.97 a month, and you get the live training and all the stuff that's in there. Plus, there's 1,400 videos, tutorial videos on just about anything technical that you need to know. For example, using cPanel, and we have a library that's just jam-packed full of stuff on how to do things technically for folks. Then we have the Wednesday night live training. I'll make sure
everybody gets that.
Okay. And there's a coupon code to use, and we'll give that to Kathleen as well to send to you, so that you don't pay. The full price is $97 a month. We want you to be able to get that 85% discount. So.
Next question comes from Judy. At what level does my website have to look in order to be ready to take advantage of what NAMS has to offer? Right now I have a website, but it's fairly bare. I still have a lot to do on it.
We have people in the 100 class who have no website. And what they do, we're actually going to spend the first day helping them build their websites and their blogs. So
okay.
They're going to have a website. In fact,
and I'll tell you, it's a great event. I actually, the last one I went to, not only was I an instructor in the Sunday morning keynoter, I also sat in on many of the sessions. And then in between sessions is where a lot of activity goes on. I got to meet with people that I've known for a while, and we finally met face-to-face. Connie was one of them. Janet Slack was another. Just the list goes on and on and on. And it's interesting because I struck up really good partnerships at that event that since that time have made me tens of thousands of dollars, because we took advantage of sitting down, breaking bread together, sharing ideas, and making decisions on what we could do that would serve our market. So there's a lot of advantage to being at a live event, and NAMS is very different than most of the events that you'll go to, because it's you won't find it to be a pitch fest at all. We're not up there pitching our products. We're up there instructing. That's the rule that David has set down. And so you're not going to have a bunch of people trying to sell you their products and services. We're there to serve you.
I'll tell you my philosophy about that quickly, because my feeling is if you're a good instructor and people resonate with you, they're going to ask you, how can I learn more from you? And that's when you get to offer them your products, because you've got somebody who's interested in you right there.
Absolutely.
And let's talk about this picture on the page, because this picture on the page I love. It absolutely represents what I believe NAMS to be. It is a connector event. All we do is introduce people to other people, and the reason we've set up the membership site is so that you can connect with people for a lifetime and be able to use people back and forth to be able to contribute to each other's businesses and help each other get things done.
There you have it. Okay, and Christina asked the question, or makes the comment, I love the idea of MyNAMS. I can't afford the travel and can't afford the time away from my kids. I'm a single mom. So MyNAMS is wonderful in that it allows me, who can't travel right now, to still make good connections and learn without losing 4 to 5 days of travel. So true, so true.
Mm-hmm.
And
it is.
Let's see, the next one is Nancy writes, the universe will find a way to kick you out if you can't do it yourself, my experience. And that's so true.
That's right.
And then Julian writes, as a member, what do we need to do to be eligible to launch a product through the NAMS launch?
You're talking about the Niche Mall?
Yes.
You know, we haven't dealt with that yet. These are all products that we have rights to sell, but since they are 100%, if you have something that you want to sell at 100% commission, that people can sell as 100% commission, and it would be a list builder for you, you could submit it to us with a sales page, and we'll put it up for you. If it is not, if it's not something you're willing to give 100% commission on, then we have to figure that out, because I don't think that it's really going to fit the niche mall model.
Okay. And then Christina writes, this has to do with your travels. She writes, I think BMW and maybe Harley has a bike tour trip suggestion on their site.
They do.
And then, okay. And Nancy writes, sometimes lack of clarity and strategy gets mistaken for lack of commitment.
Let's read that again. Lack of clarity and strategy get mistaken.
Is mistaken for lack of commitment.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I agree with that.
Yeah. So, and that's it for the questions. If anybody has a question you want to quickly shoot through, we'll still take time to answer it. But I just want to say, David, thank you so much for sharing this side of yourself with everybody, and for everybody who has been on the webinar for the last nearly 2 hours. Thank you so much. We've had almost 100% of the people who have stayed. A couple people said, I have another commitment, I have to leave. But we've had about 98% of the people who got on originally who are still on, and I thank you for your time and attention. And David, I just adore you. I adore your wife. I just think you are two of the most wonderful people that walk the face of the earth. And it's incredible how you've taken what was an idea and a concept a few years ago that is now one of the most highly revered events in the internet marketing world. And in closing, do you have any final thoughts that you would like to share? And we've got a couple of comments that are coming through that I want to read after that.
I actually have a question and a request. As you can imagine, this is not what we usually present at webinars or workshops. This is really down the path of, well, it's completely different. It's off the beaten path. And I would like to know how people respond to this, if this was valuable to them or not. It's that feedback thing that I was talking about earlier. If it is, they could, feel free to send me an email, david@mynams.com, and put Kathleen Gage in the subject. And I'd love to know if this resonated with you, if you would like to see me do it differently, if you think this is a part that doesn't need to be in a business webinar, let me know that as well.
Well, we have a few comments that came through. Nancy writes, great call. Thank you, Kathleen and David. Blessings to you both. Stephanie writes, thank you. This was a wonderful webinar, and I learned a great deal. Richard writes, thanks, great call. Christina writes, I think this was a great webinar. People, the population as a whole, are looking for more meaning and more connection from their work, so I would say do more of this. And then we have a question that came in from Judy about NAMS. How would we know what level, 100 to 400, would be most appropriate for me if I attend?
Actually, I have a questionnaire for you so that we can figure that out together.
Okay, great. And you do give specifics on if you're at this income level, this would be the one. If you're at this income level, the next one. And then Amanda,
actually, you know, I can give that quickly if you want me to, Kathleen.
Please do. Please
do. So NAMS 100 is for people, we like to call it people who are not making any money online. They may have a website, they may have a blog, they may have nothing, but they're not making any money online. They may have made a sale or two, but it certainly wasn't on purpose. NAMS 200 level is that people definitely have a website or a blog, and they might be making some sales, but they're not really sure how or why, and how to improve that, drive traffic, all of that stuff. NAMS 300 is for people who have websites, blogs, niches, are making money, know how to make money, and are probably making money enough to supplement their income. Maybe they're making enough for a car payment, or maybe they're making enough so that they don't have to work now, but their husband does, or vice versa. And that crew is the 300. Most people are 200 and 300. We do get a lot of 100 folks as well, because I love that, because they come and they go through the entire process and they only get better and better as they come back every time. And then the 400 is for people who are full-time marketers, and they really are cranking along, and their focus is really about business strategy and asset development.
Okay. And I want to read a few of the comments before we close. Amanda writes, I missed part of the webinar, but what I saw was great. Will it be recorded? Yes. If the techno gods are with us, we will have the recording on this. And Denise writes, thanks. I like the format. It was great. Julian writes, love it. Kathleen, please send membership info as soon as possible, as I would love to launch a new product at 100% commission. Thanks so much. And we will be sending that out. Sue writes, will there be a replay available of this? I had a few interruptions. I would love to hear the parts I missed. Great content. Gail writes, webinar was very helpful for business and for life. I can't, there's some abbreviation, and I don't do texting, so I don't know what those are. Believe it or not, Internet marketer Kathleen Gage does not text. Kathy writes, it was terrific. Hope there will be a replay so I can listen again. Janet writes, thank you both so much for this session. It was great, and the more spirituality we introduce to business, the more business will orient itself to service, which is the real source of prosperity. And
I agree with that one 100% completely, by the way.
Absolutely. Judy writes, what is the deadline to register for NAMS? And there is a coupon code that people can get a discount with. And what's that coupon code, David?
It's Last Chance 7. It's on the page. When you go to that page, you'll find 7. It above the button. Use that. Last Chance 7.
And it brings it down considerably. So,
yeah, it drops it like 400.
What's the deadline to register?
The deadline is you can register the day before if you want to, but the truth is that if you don't register and make the hotel reservation soon, I'm going to be concerned that you won't stay in the hotel. And to tell the truth, staying in the hotel is where the action is. And we've negotiated a great rate for you.
You definitely want to stay in the hotel because there's so much activity going on, and like I said, in between sessions is just as important as the sessions themselves. Greg writes, my wife and I have been traveling for full-time for over 2 years now. If David would like some travel tips for touring, have him send me a message. And Greg, if you could write David at, give your email again, David at mynams.com, is it?
That was it.
Okay, David at mynams.com, and I know, Greg, he'd love to hear from you. Sandy writes, I missed some of the webinar, but it was very helpful.
Good.
And that's all on the comments. So, David, I just so appreciate you sharing this information. This was wonderful, and I appreciate everybody who stayed on the line and those who will be listening into the replay and watching the replay. And, David, if you think I love you, you're right. You are just such a delight to know and have in my life. And to everybody, thank you so much. I hope we've served you with this call today. And, David, if you have anything left that you'd like to say, feel free.
Back at you, Kathleen. Love you a lot.
Okay. Take care. Bye-bye.